There is a moment quiet, almost invisible, when an American traveling abroad steps into a new environment and feels something shift inside them. It's not a dramatic shock. It's not fear. It's more like an internal echo, a tremor that ripples under the surface of the mind. They look around, take in the space, and feel a subtle unease, a feeling not of danger, but of disappearance. Because for many Americans, the first true culture clash isn't language, food, or even etiquette. It's silence, not the absence of sound. The world is still full of footsteps, murmurs, coffee cups, train brakes, and elevator hums, but the absence of acknowledgment, the absence of the small social signals that, back home, quietly stitch together everyday life, smiles, nods, greetings, micro-rituals of validation that Americans have inhaled since childhood, like oxygen. And when those signals vanish, a new sensation emerges, subtle at first, then strangely powerful. It's a feeling that says, no one sees me. Not literally, of course. People glance at you, walk around you, hand you receipts and menus. But they don't perform the recognition you're used to. They don't broadcast friendliness. They don't orbit you with customer service sunlight or greet you with automatic enthusiasm, and something inside the American psyche reacts to that absence, something learned so early and so deeply that most never realize it's there. This is the phenomenon known as the invisibility reflex. It unfolds not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of small scenes, each ordinary, each understandable, each containing a quiet psychological shockwave. Scene 1. The elevator. An American couple steps into a hotel elevator in Vienna, Amsterdam, or Zurich, anywhere, really, and the doors close behind them. Two locals are already inside. They stand quietly, not unfriendly, not stiff, just silent. No smile. No hello. No polite acknowledgment. The Americans wait for the ritual to begin, the shared nod, the weather comment, the polite laugh. But nothing comes. The elevator rides upward in complete social neutrality, and something in the Americans starts buzzing. Like a radio losing signal, the ride lasts 20 seconds. It feels like 2 minutes. When they step off, they exhale without realizing they were holding their breath. They say things like, "That was awkward. Why were they so cold? Did we do something wrong?" But the truth is simpler. Nothing happened. For the locals, that elevator ride was perfectly normal. For the Americans, it was an unexpected social vacuum. A small moment where they felt invisible. Scene 2. The grocery aisle. In a Scandinavian supermarket, an American stands still with a basket in hand. Not because they're confused by the layout, not because they can't find the oat milk or cheese, but because they are waiting for something. They're waiting for a sign that someone is available. Waiting for an employee to look up and approach. Waiting for the unspoken dance of American customer service. Back home, a lingering shopper attracts helpers like bees to sugar. Need any help finding something? Doing okay over here. Just checking in. But abroad, the staff remain at a respectful distance. Not aloof, not lazy, just restrained. They will help if asked, but they will not hover. They will not interrupt your browsing. They will not assume you need assistance. So the American stands there, waiting for a signal that never arrives, Minutes pass, and the quiet behind their ribs grows louder. Why isn't anyone helping me? Am I supposed to ask? What if I interrupt? A simple grocery errand becomes an unexpected test of autonomy. Scene 3. The museum. In Rome, or Paris, or Vienna. An American family walks into a museum expecting structure, a route, a guide, a human presence directing the experience. Instead, they find a map, a giant, detailed map rooms labeled, corridors clear, icons beautifully marked, a masterpiece of functional design. But to an American raised on curated experiences, that map is not guidance, it's responsibility. It demands self-navigation. It assumes competence. It implies that adults can orient themselves without a shepherd. For some, that feels empowering. For others, it feels like being left alone in a maze. Why isn't anyone directing us? Who tells us where the important rooms are? How do we know we're doing this right? A museum, one of the simplest social spaces, becomes another mirror reflecting the American relationship with validation. Why these moments matter. Individually, these scenes are mild. They are not dramatic. They are not crises, but collectively, they reveal something deep about cultural wiring. Americans are raised in a social climate where acknowledgment equals safety. Warmth equals politeness, interaction equals respect, and supervision equals hospitality. From early childhood, American life is filled with constant microsignals. Say hello. Use your inside voice. Be friendly. Greet the teacher. Smile for the cashier. Tell the waiter how you're doing. These rituals aren't meaningless, they are the glue of American social coherence. In a large, diverse country, friendliness becomes a universal language, but it also becomes something else. A form of emotional scaffolding, a structure that says, "We see you. You are safe here. You belong because we acknowledge you." And so, when Americans enter cultures where autonomy is the default, where silence is respect, and neutrality is politeness, they lose that scaffolding. The environment stops announcing confirmation signals. Suddenly, the question arises, if no one is validating me, what does that mean? For Europeans, it means nothing. For Americans, it can mean everything. The two social operating systems. To understand the emotional impact, you have to recognize the two systems at play. American social logic says warmth is politeness, engagement is safety, interaction is social glue, and service is emotional performance. A waiter checks on you often because it signals care. A barista asks your name because it signals welcome. A greeter at the store says hi because it signals safety. These signals are not extra, they are the default. European social logic says neutrality is politeness, privacy is respect, autonomy is safety, and service is functional. A waiter approaches only when needed. Because it signals respect, a barista gives you your drink because that's the transaction. A store clerk does not hover because that would be intrusive. No performance. No excessive warmth. No emotional padding. And when these two systems meet, the result is not conflict, it's confusion. Why silence feels like rejection. Ask Europeans about Americans, and you'll often hear, they're so friendly, they talk easily, they smile a lot. Ask Americans about Europeans, and you might hear, they're distant, they're cold, they're unfriendly. Both interpretations are wrong. Because both systems express respect differently. Americans show respect by engaging. Europeans show respect by not intruding. One says, "I acknowledge you because you matter." The other says, "I leave you alone because you matter." Two opposite behaviors, one underlying intention, but the American traveler doesn't always see that deeper meaning. They feel the surface layer. They feel the gap between expectation and reality. They feel the quiet, and that quiet feels like ERASURE. The moment of invisibility. There is a specific psychological shift, subtle but profound, that many Americans experience abroad. It happens slowly, then suddenly. There is a moment, maybe on a train, or in a café, or walking down a narrow street, when they realize, I am not the center of anyone's attention. I am not responsible for their comfort. They are not responsible for mine. I exist here quietly. For someone raised in a system of mutual acknowledgment, this can feel unnerving. Because in the American context, to be seen is to be safe. To be greeted is to be welcomed. To be checked on is to be valued. Remove those signals, and the brain interprets it as danger, even when no danger is present. This is the essence of the invisibility reflex. Not literal invisibility, emotional invisibility. A moment where the self feels unreferenced by the environment. For some, that's deeply uncomfortable. For others, unexpectedly freeing. A new kind of freedom. Something interesting happens after the initial shock fades. Americans begin to adjust. They begin to observe. They begin to breathe differently in the silence, and slowly they discover something new. Without constant validation, a different kind of confidence emerges, a quieter one, a self-generated one, not based on confirmation from others. Not built on micro-acknowledgments. Not dependent on social feedback, a confidence rooted in autonomy. They realize they can navigate alone, order alone, decide alone, move alone. Not because they must, but because the culture believes they can. And this shift, the internal one, is profound. Because what first felt like no one sees me transforms into I don't need to be seen to exist. This realization hits differently depending on the person. For some, it feels like empowerment. For others, like an unraveling of old assumptions. But nearly everyone who stays long enough begins to feel the texture of this new independence, the unexpected reversal. When they eventually return to the United States, something strange happens. The old environment, once invisible in its familiarity, now feels amplified. The greetings, the smiles, the constant verbal affirmations, the eagerness to help, the warmth woven into every transaction. It feels louder, brighter, more deliberate. Some find it comforting. Others find it overwhelming after weeks or months abroad. But almost everyone recognizes the contrast. America speaks in acknowledgments. Europe speaks in permissions. America says, we see you. You belong because we recognize you. Europe says, you belong because no one questions your presence. Two social languages, two emotional climates, two interpretations of politeness. Both valid. Both coherent. Both beautiful in their own Ways, but different deeply. Structurally different. So why do Americans feel invisible? Because they come from a culture where visibility is part of the social contract, where the absence of acknowledgment is coded as danger, dislike, disengagement, or disrespect. Meanwhile, in much of Europe, the absence of acknowledgment is coded as privacy, trust, respect, and autonomy. Same behavior, opposite meaning. To Europeans, silence in an elevator is normal. To Americans, it is suspicious. To Europeans, being left alone in a café is respectful. To Americans, it feels like neglect. To Europeans, self-navigation is assumed. To Americans, guided experience is expected. The result is not hostility, it is mismatched assumptions about what it means to be polite. The real transformation. In the end, the greatest shift is not in understanding Europe. It's in understanding oneself. Because the moment an American truly grasps that silence abroad is not rejection, it is trust. Something important opens inside them, a doorway into a new kind of presence, a presence that doesn't depend on external cues, a presence that doesn't need to be constantly reflected, a presence that exists quietly, firmly, confidently. This doorway changes how a person travels. How they see others. How they see themselves. They realize something that was always true. You are visible even when no one signals it. You matter even when no one validates it. You belong even when no one announces it. And perhaps most importantly, invisibility is not the opposite of being seen. It is the beginning of seeing differently.